You're listening to Death of the Reader. Flex and Herds here for your Murder Mystery World Tour, and we are here, Herds, discussing a brand old novel.
Whoa!
Ngaio Marsh's Overture to Death.
Yeah, we're revisiting the Queens of Crime once again. It's like we have some sort of prerogative to tap into these Queens of Crime. It's great. But yeah, we're doing a theatrics-focused murder mystery. 7 actors enter a room. 6 of them leave because one of them is dead. It's very awkward. The after party is particularly unpleasant. As a theater nerd, I'm really loving all the wacky hijinks that the characters get up to, especially when they're trying to do dress rehearsals and pick what play they're going to do. It's a good time.
We're talking chapters 1 to 9 today. This book was published in 1939, and I think one of the interesting things to me is that it feels like the social nature of the book is in itself theatric, because that's why we're coming back to Ngaio Marsh once again. We covered Ngaio Marsh and Stella Duffy with Money in the Morgue just after looking at Opening Night or Night at the Vulcan, and those books had a very particular Roderick Alleyn in them, where he was a man that I feel the genre has left behind, a bit of a masculine stereotype. And we haven't seen nearly as much of Roderick Alleyn so far in this book. He arrives in our last chapter and says that he's a big fanboy of Sherlock Holmes.
He does. He says that you shouldn't disparage him in Alleyn's presence because Sherlock is such a cool guy, apparently.
Most of what this stretch of chapters is concerned with is the putting on of a small local production to fund a piano for the local youth center.
Yep. Because the old one is broken and busted and falling apart.
Well, it sounds like it has one key that's out of tune, and they've just given up on tuning that one particular key, which I thought was a bit odd.
It's pretty fun. The entire kind of premise of this novel with these 7 characters who they're in a small town. They don't have that much authority, but they, through the course of trying to decide which play and who should take which part and all this sort of thing, they drive every iota of what little authority they have to push each other around. If this were a normal small theater production, it'd be a bunch of friends or people who actually want to cooperate on something. But it seems like all of the main 7 characters are in love triangles and going behind each other's backs and competing for attention, and somebody has to play the opening number on the old piano, which is this huge thing with the 2 old hens, they're called, Mrs. Campanula and Mrs. Prentice, Eleanor Prentice. The 2 of them are constantly competing, and also for I believe it's the rector's affections. Yeah, by the way...
Well, yeah, basically, there are sort of 3 main families we've been introduced to thus far, and I use the definition of 3 very loosely. It's like 2 and 2 halves. We've got the Jerninghams, of which Henry, the young son, is sort of our protagonist. We've got Jocelyn, the squire, the head of the family, who's sort of in charge of the estate, Pen Cuckoo, and Eleanor, who you mentioned, is the cousin who's been brought in and is trying to make herself the matriarch of the family, much to everyone's annoyance.
I was going to say, what does she do? Although, to be fair, what does anybody do in this story outside of put on poorly produced plays? And I think that's kind of the bit, that these characters are not that, they're not that significant.
Yeah, and then our other family is the Copelands, which is Walter, the rector of the nearby church, and Dina, his daughter, who is sort of in a relationship that's blossoming with Henry Jerningham.
A quiet relationship, yes. That everybody approves of course.
The last half of the family is Idris Campanella, who you mentioned. And one of the main, thrusts of the book thus far is that Eleanor and Idris are both women out of place in the social hierarchy of this town who purport to bond over that position while absolutely hating each other's guts.
They hate each other. They're both they're referred to in the book as spinsters, which is a loaded term, but it basically means that they have not gotten married. So it seems as though that is, a big part of this book, of course. But even beyond those 2 and 2 half families, we also have Dr. William Templet, who is the doctor of this story, and his
good
good personal friend Celia Ross.
Close.
Yeah, I'm not really clear what their
relation.
relationship was, because Celia Ross, she's sitting on his lap and stuff, but she's also flirting with the squire. It's a whole like, oh, those catty women in the 1930s bit. It's ridiculous, frankly.
Here's the other thing, right? Is would this book not have come out during like a time where this would have been difficult because of the Second World War? Like, there's almost a supreme exaggeration to this because this sort of conflict couldn't even happen because everyone was so preoccupied with like rationing and all of this other nonsense going on from the war, right?
Well, it's also the surgence of women's contribution to the war effort, right? Like, I'm not an expert on the topic, but like, you're not wrong in that the ideas that this book is kind of engaging with, it feels like a parody of people who still believe that these ideas are the norm, that these sorts of ways of living are normal, because we're moving into a more progressive age, right?
Well, yeah, I think that's actually one of the most impressive parts about this book is that even though, as you read through, it's got all of the dire language of like, oh, spinsters and the women at each other's throat and this like catty pre-feminist portrayal, but there's an aura of sarcasm about it where it's like the book's in on the joke.
It's got the air of parody around it, of these characters. Like, we're not supposed to see these 7 main characters, maybe the young characters exceptionally, mostly illustrated through the conflict around which type of play they want to put on, because the old spinsters are saying, well, we have to put on a classic play. But then the youngsters say, well, there's this modern play that's actually quite good, and you'd like it if you just give it a chance. And then, of course, I think it's Miss Campanula, she puts on her glasses and reads the play and is looking at a scene that's supposed to be funny, and she's like deliberately not laughing. Like, she's finding ways to not engage with the progressive emblems in the book. It's definitely commenting on that like generational divide and the way that times are changing, which is quite impressive, actually.
And it's also got that specifically timeless element of like, oh goodness, these young uncouth individuals sitting on people's laps and professing love to one another without considering the family function of marriage. Obviously, that is a tried and true trope that is not particular to this book, but I did quite enjoy the echoes that this book rings forth to.
I mean, I agree with that. I guess the part of the story I thought you were going to just do an absolute drive-by on is the idea of a group project, because like you can take the structure in this book of analyzing how these 7 people with a 6-part play don't get along, and you can take it to any sort of high school group project setting or work group project setting, and you can see the actors in this play that don't do their job properly. The people that are doing, like Dina in particular, is doing a lot of work because she's the professional actress.
Well, Celia is the professional actress and Dina is like the theater enthusiast, and Celia is just letting Dina like soak all of the work while she's like, oh, I know what I'm doing because I work in the theater.
She asked to bring in a bunch of like cushions and her personal effects so that she can work properly, but she doesn't do any of the actual work. And there's a lot of that in the book where some characters, Dr. Template thinks he's helping when he isn't, and Eleanor like puts her script in little like sticky notes, 1930s equivalent sticky notes around the stage, so she doesn't have to, she's working smarter, not harder. It's got this timeless conflict where everybody can relate to some degree to having to work with a group of people that functionally don't work well together.
Yes. And also that like there's the constant slate of like agreements that people are making with each other while not saying their frustrations.
You mean the compromises?
Yeah, one of the key tensions we have leading up to the actual murder is that Miss Prentice and Miss Campanula both have a signature piece on the piano, and it seems like the book's subtext is that it's the only thing they can play because they have this one party trick, right? For Miss Prentice, it's the Venetian Suite, and for Miss Campanula, it's Rachmaninoff number. And nobody is happy that that's the overture that this play is going to get because neither of them quite make sense, but they don't have anyone else who can play the piano to do this. Which is why, of course, it's so fitting when the murder happens as that piece of music actually gets played, right?
Yeah, the novel takes its time setting that up. I remember reading the characters sort of thinking about how when Campanula plays her piece of music, she does the 3 notes and then she puts her foot down on the soft pedal. The number of times and the amount of emphasis we put on that rote set of actions is like, well, this is going to be important later. And of course, it's when she puts her foot on the soft pedal that the murder occurs. I quite like that. I really enjoy how much work that Ngaio Marsh puts into making a piano the murder weapon. I think that's really fun because obviously it's a play. So you could do something like, and this is not a drive-by on Simon Brett, but you could have a piece of the stage fall on someone or kill someone through poison makeup.
I just love the no one has thought of Simon Brett, but this is not a drive-by.
No one has. This is not a drive-by. No, nobody's considered him before today. Nobody has. No, but more like, look, there are lots of ways directly to do with putting on a play that you could kill someone. You could stab them with a fake sword that's actually real. That's always a fun trope. But Ngaio Marsh says, well, what if we take not something that's strictly a part of the play, but rather the bookending of the play? Because the piano is played at the start, but it is also the thing that they're trying to fund as an outcome. So in that sense, the piano symbolically bookends the putting on of the play itself, which I think is actually quite clever.
The detective showing up in the aftermath of the murder and us focusing on the characters to get us there is sort of a seemingly signature part of Ngaio Marsh's writing. And the fact that we're getting inside everyone's heads and we have this one huge long paragraph where we go, this person thought this person thought this person thought this, which is like a little mechanically tedious, but you really have to respect the way that it's like committed to showing you as much as it can in ways that a lot of other Golden Age detective fiction didn't like to typically jump in and give that much of the game away.
We have the Knox rule, of course. We should not be seeing into the mind of the killer, but it seems as though we've seen into everybody's mind evenly. So, what are you going to do?
Yeah, I think the other thing that'll be super interesting, I have been digging around to try and find sheet music of the 2 songs that the women compete with, and I was kind of interested to see how much those tunes would actually speak to the narrative of these characters, because, for example, the Rachmaninoff piece opens with this big 3-chord introduction that the book lampoons a couple of times, and I was really curious to see if there was more to read into there, but I'll have to report back if I'm able to actually dig up the source text on that matter.
The musical source of this novel.
Yeah.
As it were. That's good.
Either way, you're listening to Death of the Reader. We are discussing Ngaio Marsh's Overture to Death from 1939, chapters 1 to 9. Stick around for more. You're listening to 2SER 107.3. You're listening to Death of the Reader. Flex and Herds here for your Murder Mystery World Tour. Hope you're going well. We are discussing Ngaio Marsh's Overture to Death, chapters 1 to 9.
Woo!
And Herds, you're in the hot seat today.
Mm-hmm. Uh-oh. I'm doing all right, Flex. Thanks for asking. I'm enjoying the mystery. You got a question there?
Could you give us a brief overview of the actual finality of the crime itself here in this book? Because
finality?
Yes, we alluded to the fact that the soft pedal in the piano sort of precipitated the crime. Please elucidate.
Look, I pick up what you're putting down. So here's something that I mentioned to Flex just the other day as I was flicking through the novel, is that for all that I've said and thought about the symbology of the book and some of the subtleties, I really enjoy that the murder weapon is the piano, but also just a gun. because there are 1,001 more subtle ways that you could have killed someone with a piano. Most notably by having the old crumbly piano fall on your murder victim. But according to the police analysis, there is a pulley system that's been rigged inside the piano that ties the soft pedal to the trigger of a gun that's pointed directly at whoever is currently playing the piano. Now, I'm not going to say anything to, somebody's head could be positioned slightly differently to what you're expecting, and that the barrel is actually quite small. I'm just saying you usually have to aim those things.
Yeah, this is like video game rules. You get the joystick on your little gamepad controller close enough, and the gun just snaps to.
But also, you've left the joystick in that position for probably at least a day, based on other events in the story. I really like that it's a gun. And we already have a soft lead on how to figure out, because they talk about how the pulley system is a picture-perfect replica of a toy. It's like a kit that kids can buy and set up in their own homes to pull triggers of their own guns. And there's a small child in the audience who is looking very sheepishly at the piano. Georgie Biggins or something. Is that right? Am I close? I feel like that's...
I think that's so.
Close
that
enough.
Sounds right.
So we're faced with the death occurs on the night of the performance in full view of everyone, which is fantastic because all the little children in the front row who've been brought from the youth center scream and panic, and it's just a great time. But I think we have to be real here because this is a classic murder mystery story, and I don't think that the killer is a small child. I think that that's a safe bet.
I'm shocked. I'm appalled.
So
how could you insinuate something like this?
Here's the thing. I think that this Georgie Biggins character, who sounds very suspicious when I say his name like that, but maybe has actually set up the police system to pull some sort of prank in the piano, but I don't think it was a gun that was designed to murder somebody.
So what you're saying is that the child is still responsible?
I hope so. That's my hope, is that he's still responsible so that we can clap him in irons and haul him away in a fake we got him scene. But in terms of the actual structure of the crime, right, we've got 7 actors and actresses, 1 body, so it has to be one of these 6 main characters. It has to be Jocelyn, Henry, Eleanor, not Taylor. Taylor's the butler of that family. Dina, Template, and Miss Ross. I think that's everybody. It has to be one of them. And I would imagine, based on my previous time with theatrical murder mysteries, there is a last-minute role change where the person who was playing the piano changes.
Has a sore finger.
They have a sore finger, so they can't play anymore, which is a very unfortunate coincidence that definitely does not implicate her in the slightest. But I will say that so the person who's killed is Campanula, and the other person who was up until the last minute supposed to play her song on the piano was Miss Prentice. So we have to assume that if the target originally was Miss Campanula, then it has to be one of the characters who was responsible for Miss Prentice being removed from the piano, which is Miss Prentice herself and Dr. Template, who told her not to play because of her poor little finger. However, Flex.
This is an excellent mechanical analysis so far.
It is.
Continue.
However, Flex, there is an alternate explanation that I think is being hidden very cleverly by Ngaio Marsh, and that is, what if...
that the piano is alive?
It's possible. I wouldn't put it past Ngaio Marsh.
It wasn't actually a gun that shot her. It was that the piano ate her head in a way that
with
looked
a very small
distinctly
mouth.
like a bullet hole.
Well, it was clearly it's the alien from the sci-fi horror films. It stuck itself and ate her face.
The singular alien from
the only one.
Sci-fi
Well, okay,
horror
look, there were, let's say 2. One of the 2 alien films that I legally recognize as existing. But anyway, the alternative is that Miss Prentice was actually the target all along, which I think is much more likely because, a murder victim being the person who was actually meant to be killed, that's insane.
Before we move on from that particular point, do
Yes.
you think that the finger injury was faked because the crime's, happening was somehow leaked to the intended victim?
Ooh. Yes. Well, I mean, I think it would be crass of me to assume that an injury on one particular finger that you need to play the piano, it could be faked. But
Well, didn't she say that she could have just played the piece with a slight adjustment and it would have been fine?
well, maybe she has injuries, owies, as the doctors call them, in multiple fingers. Anyway, my point is, let's just say for now that she's faked her horrible injury of having an owie in her fingers. That means that somebody was actually attempted to kill Miss Prentice, and I can think of no better candidate than the lovers, because Henry has
Which lovers? Hold on, there are so many lovers.
No.
While we're
Shakespearean lovers. It's Henry and Dina. Get
lovers.
out of life. Shakespearean lovers. In this
Can I still
theatrical
take
murder
this
mystery.
small moment to bemoan whoever wrote the plot summary on Wikipedia?
You can moan as much as you like. Why do you say that? What do you mean?
I'm gonna pull this up and quote it directly because I read over it while we were trying to find the book. But whoever wrote the article says of Eleanor Prentice, Jocelyn's cousin, Eleanor Prentice, is a sexless spinster who is madly in love with Rector Copeland. And I can't say that it's wrong, but also I cannot endorse its summary.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I'm looking forward to learning about what her madness in love might make her do, because as far as I'm concerned, having not read that summary, the lovers are definitely Henry and Dina, because they're the ones who are trying to get together, and Henry is essentially our protagonist.
They met on a cloud top hill.
They did. And
they had a big romantic moment.
They did.
I actually thought that scene was kind of cute. I liked that they came up there and they're like, "Oh goodness, I had everything prepared, but actually, hey,
you're cute. Yeah,
it's great. Cute. Yeah, it was nice. I like
it's a nice little scene. But in reality, it is a malicious cover for Henry and Dina as the murderous couple of this novel, because, as we've said previously, hold on. It was a real scene. I'm not about to say it was a fake scene, but maybe we didn't see the end of it.
I was going.
Maybe this is not a meta murder mystery. I'm sorry.
I don't need to finish my sentences here. Hertz could just do the whole rest of the show without me asking a single complete sentence.
I'll let you ask as many questions as you like in 1 second. So after the hilltop conference plan to murder happens, Dina ends up doing all of the work. Suspicious. She thinks maybe I should have moved all that stuff on the piano. It obstructs the view of the guests. Maybe she was afraid that all the flowers or whatever on the piano were going to obstruct the gun barrel. Also, in the section where we see into everybody's brains, her section is suspiciously short and basically just what Henry said, but like a little bit more whimsical. So I'm just saying Dina is the real murderess of this story. And I rest my case, Your Honor.
I think that makes perfect sense.
What are your questions, Flex?
Well, I guess my leading question is that you've boiled this down to the lovers, the romance, very sensible things to pin a crime to in murder mystery.
And they're doing it so they can be together. Yes.
Yeah, some texts would even say it's the only practical motive for a murder mystery, but I'd never quote those texts because we're not allowed to on this show. But one of the things that I'm interested in is that so much of what's going on in this book is about a fundraiser. It's about raising money.
It is about money.
We explicitly run into this sequence where we're raising money for the piano, only for Jocelyn to say, "Oh, well, that's fine. Even if we don't make enough, I can just put up some more money." And Celia Ross comes in and she says, "Oh, well, I'm being awfully selfish here, but I think you should put on the play that I like, and I will pay for the very expensive rights that we will not specify the value for because we don't want to put plot holes in our own book."
This is true. We don't want to adjudicate financial value to our plays.
Exactly. I will pay for the quote-unquote very expensive rights for this play. What's all of this money laundering going on for, Herds? Why can't they just buy a damn piano?
Oh, you're right. What if because Ross could just buy the piano, right?
Ross and Jocelyn, it seems, could just buy the piano for the cost it would take to put on the play in the first place.
My immediate counter-argument is that then we wouldn't have a book Flex, but look...
I'm just saying, if the evidence exists on the page, it should factor in somehow, and I feel like you've left this big old dangler of a plot hook.
Well, I'll tell you what. Let's say, why would they put on a play instead of just buying the damn piano? Oh, That is a good question. That does seem very silly of them.
I mean, really, like, this entire discussion could devolve into the entire business of charities and why charities put on events and so on and so forth.
I was going to say, isn't it to foster community spirit? That's not a very murder mystery answer, but, like, isn't that the point? Isn't that the whole reason why you put on a play to make money rather than just pulling the money from thin air?
Let me re-ask my question, Hertz. No. Why is money being such an important part of the discussion thus far if it's not going to factor into the crime? We know why they're not buying the damn piano, but I think it elucidates the discrepancy in the outcomes that this book purports are available.
So here's the thing. I know that Miss Prentice, she's cozying up to the Cooper estate. She wants the money, right? So if Henry and Dina ruin the play, then Jocelyn doesn't spend his money on the piano because the whole thing shuts down. And if they kill Miss Prentice, then Henry's the one who gets the money somehow, as long as they don't get, kicked out of the family.
Yeah, so Henry's too concerned about Miss Prentice actually succeeding to get into his father's good graces. He's starting to become burdened by the pushback.
Yes, that all makes sense to me. If they kill Miss Prentice and then, assumedly, in the second half of the novel, kill Jocelyn, then they'll take all of the money that would have been spent. Because if they're both dead, then nobody could spend money on a piano. And Henry and Dina can buy whatever non-piano thing that newlywed couples need to spend money on.
Well, also, we have this scene where Henry and Dina are up on the hill at Cloudy Top worrying about if they'll be able to fix the leaks in the roof.
You have to clarify that it's Cloudy Top every time, but yes.
They're worried, Herds. They're worried about if they're going to be able to afford to fix the leaks in the roof of the estates they're going to inherit.
They're worried about the 1939 financial crisis.
Yes, that's the one. That's when the financial crisis happened.
That's it. That's how it works. Sure. You know what? That all makes sense to me. They're worried about having enough money to patch the leaky roofs in all the estates, so they had to kill the piano, and they do that by attempting to kill Miss Prentice and then killing Jocelyn. And then they win, and then they get all the money to have no leaks. Or if they want a leaky roof, they can have it. They have the money, they decide where it goes, and then they go to Vegas and they do whatever they want there.
Before we go, Herds, I've been told by production.
No, not production.
That
they've come for me.
You read by sheer accident.
Yes.
The first couple of sentences of chapter 10.
Yes, I have to confess. Mostly because it jumped out at me because it says a list of the suspects. It says the parson, the squire, the parson's daughter, the squire's son, the two church hens, and the local medico, which is the most succinct laying out of all the characters that I could find.
Do you feel like this book was solvable without that particular sentence?
No. Because all the characters have so many different titles. At least it feels like they are.
Yeah, no, there really are. There are too many epithets going on in this book, and I was thrown. I finished the entire damn book really confused because I kept thinking that Henry was the squire because he's the young man of the family, only to discover I was horridly wrong.
Because, I thought that Jocelyn was both the squire and the rector, but I realized that didn't make any sense because he's also the priest. So I had to go back and check who the rector was. And then I was like, why would Jocelyn be parent to both of the lovers? That doesn't work.
Well, for those of you joining us who read the first couple of sentences of chapter 10, you have our blessing to have committed this horrid sin.
Now that we've at the end of the second half of this episode,
Yes, exactly.
Sounds good.
Next week on the show, we are going to be covering chapters 10 to 18 of Overture to Death by Ngaio Marsh. Herds has another theory to pose on
it's gonna
the
be great.
program.
Yeah, it might have something to do with injured fingers. Spoilers.
I have no idea what you seem to think the crime could have boiled down to, Herds.
If it makes you feel any better, I definitely need to... I'm going to see if there's anything more to the motivation. Let's put it that way. Let's see if we can figure that one out. Next time on.
You're listening to Death of the Reader, your murder mystery world tour here on 2SER 107.3. We'll see you next week with more Ngaio Marsh. Thanks ever so much for joining us. We're out of here.